My name is Tessa Whitmore. I'm 37 years old, a payroll specialist in Columbus, Ohio, and for almost 11 years, I believed I had built a quiet, ordinary life with the man I loved. My husband, Daniel, worked in commercial construction. We weren't rich, but we owned a small 3-bedroom house, had 2 reliable cars, and spent most Friday nights cooking dinner together. We talked about eventually traveling more, fixing up the backyard, and maybe downsizing once we got older. I thought those were our plans. I didn't know Daniel had been living another life behind my back. The strange part was that when I finally discovered the truth, the cheating wasn't even the worst thing he had done. The worst part was realizing how carefully he had been preparing for me to take the blame. For years I had defended Daniel. When he came home late, I believed him. When he stopped answering his phone for hours, I assumed work was overwhelming. When he suddenly became protective of his phone, I told myself every marriage went through difficult periods. Then one Tuesday evening, I noticed something that changed everything. Daniel had fallen asleep on the couch. His phone was charging beside him. A message appeared on the screen. I wasn't trying to invade his privacy. I actually walked past it without looking. Then I saw one sentence. "Are you ever going to tell her?" I stopped. I stared at the phone for several seconds. Daniel woke up a few minutes later and immediately grabbed it. "What?" he asked. "Who texted you?" "Nobody." That answer frightened me more than the message. I had known Daniel for 11 years. He had always been a terrible liar. But that night, he looked directly into my eyes and lied without hesitation. "It's a work thing," he said. I nodded. "Okay." He seemed relieved. What he didn't know was that something inside me had already changed. I didn't confront him again. Instead, I started paying attention. Over the next few weeks, I noticed patterns I had ignored for years. There were hotel charges on our joint credit card, restaurant bills from places he had never mentioned, a second email account, and one woman's name appearing repeatedly in his phone records. Her name was Marissa. I eventually discovered she worked for one of the companies Daniel did business with. But then I found something worse. The relationship wasn't new. It had been going on for almost 4 years. 4 years. While I was sitting beside him at family dinners, helping him choose birthday gifts for his mother, and worrying about his stressful work schedule, he had been seeing another woman. I confronted him on a Saturday morning. I placed printed phone records on the kitchen table. "Tell me the truth." Daniel looked at the papers. Then he looked at me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he sighed. "Yes, that was all. No apology. No explanation. Just yes." I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. "How long?" He rubbed his face. "It's complicated." "How long, Daniel?" "Almost 4 years." I laughed. Not because anything was funny. I laughed because my mind couldn't process what I was hearing. 4 years. I asked him why. His answer destroyed whatever sympathy I still had. "You were always busy. You cared more about work than me." I stared at him. I had spent years helping pay our bills, managing our household, supporting his career, and making excuses for his absence. And somehow he had turned his betrayal into my fault. But then he said something that made my stomach drop. "I think we should separate." I whispered, "You already decided that, didn't you?" He didn't answer. Over the next few days, Daniel became strangely calm. He moved some of his clothes to his brother's house. He told his family that our marriage had been falling apart for a long time. Then mutual friends began sending me messages. Some said they were sorry. Others asked what I had done to make Daniel unhappy. That's when I realized this wasn't simply an affair. He had already started controlling the story. And I had no idea how far he had planned ahead. A week later, I received an email from our mortgage company. There was a problem with paperwork connected to our house. Daniel had apparently submitted documents claiming we were preparing to refinance. I had never agreed to any refinancing. I called the company immediately. They told me Daniel had provided financial documents that included information from our joint accounts. I froze. Then I checked our bank statements. Nearly $18,000 was missing from our joint savings. Daniel had transferred it in small amounts over more than a year. I confronted him. You took our savings. I was protecting myself. From what? From you. That was the moment something inside me finally went quiet. I stopped crying. I stopped begging. I stopped asking him to explain himself. I simply said, okay. Daniel looked confused. That's it. I nodded. That's it. The next morning I contacted a lawyer. I brought every document I had. Bank statements, messages, mortgage records, phone records, emails. I didn't secretly hack anything. I didn't break into his accounts. I simply collected records I was legally entitled to access and preserved copies of everything connected to our joint finances. My lawyer told me something I'll never forget. Don't warn him about what you have, let the paperwork speak. So I listened. I opened a separate bank account. I changed my direct deposit. I documented every shared expense. I made copies of our mortgage records. And I stopped discussing money with Daniel. He thought my silence meant I was defeated. He became even more confident. Then came the final blow. Daniel filed paperwork claiming that I had been financially irresponsible and had contributed very little to our household. He even claimed some of our savings had disappeared because of my spending. For the first time, I was afraid. Not of losing Daniel. I was afraid of losing my home, my financial stability, and the life I had spent years building. Then my lawyer found something. A transfer from our savings account had gone directly to an account connected to a company Daniel partially owned with his brother. The money had been used to pay business expenses. And there was more. The same company had paid for several hotel rooms where Daniel had met Marissa. I suddenly understood everything. He hadn't simply been cheating. He had been moving marital money into a business account while preparing to make me look irresponsible. But Daniel had made one mistake. He had assumed I would never look closely. My lawyer requested the appropriate financial records through the legal process. And those records told the story for me. Daniel's accusations began falling apart one by one. Then came the twist I never expected. Marissa contacted me. I almost deleted her message. Instead, I opened it. She wrote that Daniel had told her he was already divorced. She had recently discovered that he was still married and that he had been using money from our joint accounts. But that wasn't why she contacted me. She attached a copy of an email Daniel had sent her 2 years earlier. In it, he wrote that he planned to clean up the financial situation before leaving me. 2 years earlier. He had been planning this long before I knew anything. And at the bottom of the email was something even more shocking. He had mentioned my name and wrote that I was too trusting to notice. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I smiled. Not because I was happy. Because for the first time, I knew exactly who Daniel was. And he finally had no control over what happened next. During the legal proceedings, Daniel tried to negotiate privately. He wanted me to sign an agreement quickly. My lawyer reviewed it and told me not to. The financial records showed that far more money had been moved than Daniel originally admitted. His own documents contradicted his accusations. Eventually, the situation was resolved through the proper legal process. I kept my share of the marital assets and protected my financial future. Daniel was forced to account for the money he had transferred. The house was handled according to the final agreement, and I walked away without the debt and financial damage he had tried to leave behind. But the most satisfying moment came later. I saw Daniel outside the courthouse. He looked exhausted. He approached me. "Tessa, can we talk?" I looked at him. "You've already said everything. I made mistakes." "No," I said quietly, "you made choices." He looked down. "I never thought you'd fight this hard." I almost smiled. "That was your biggest mistake." He stood there silently. Then he asked, "Do you hate me?" I shook my head. "No, I just don't care what you do anymore." And that was the truth. Months later, I moved into a smaller apartment near downtown Columbus. I started taking weekend photography classes, something I had wanted to do for years but always postponed because Daniel said we were too busy. I rebuilt my savings. I traveled alone for the first time. And slowly, my life stopped feeling like something I had lost. It started feeling like something I had finally reclaimed. Looking back, I used to think my final move was exposing Daniel. It wasn't. The final move was refusing to let his betrayal define the rest of my life. He spent years believing my kindness made me weak. He was wrong. My kindness was never weakness. It was simply something I gave to the wrong person. And when I finally took it back, I didn't destroy him. I simply stopped allowing him to destroy me.